this is IBM Museum, and I'm doing a couple incremental videos here. And that's where I have a system set up on the bench, and I need to go through and explain just some topic or some aspect of that. And in this case, I've got the IBM PS2 Model 60 behind me on the bench. Let's go ahead and pull up a page just to kind of go through the aspects to the Model 60. The submodels is what I'm going at in particular in this case. And I'll provide a link to this in the video description. Immediately at the top, we have the shows 8560, which is the model, the 8500 series being the first release of PS2s, and or the earlier PS2s in this case. Now, there is a just above that in this header, of course, we got links to the reference diskette and the actually even the IBM announcement. And it, as it shows there, it's got in parentheses 8560-041 and 8560-071. So the specifications that are listed there, the 8560-041 is an MFM, 44 megabyte MFM drive. And I've got, actually it's the other unit that I've had up on the bench with that 44 megabyte MFM drive. In this case, the model I have behind me on the bench is the 8560-071. And that is with that 70 megabyte ESDI drive. So I'm going to bring the page down. I'll also take myself off the screen so I can kind of shift back here to where I know I have the full field of view. And I've pulled out my box because I intend to work through the box of drives here to go through and test them for functionality, just like I tested the controllers. Now, of the 4 drives I have here, I do have this one really nice in an anti-static pack. I do have other anti-static bags, and I can go through and get these drives in there as well. But this is, I recognize this by just kind of that step of the drive case. And this is actually marked, it has a Seagate identifier on it. Get my camera to focus in. And it's a model ST-4053, assembled in Singapore. But I recognize this, especially with the label. In fact, I was looking through, is there a size? Okay, I don't see necessarily a size, but there is an aspect of that from there's a defect map sticker that's on these, and it tells the IBM part number. It's probably easier for me to read on camera here, of the 6373507 IBM EC, and they have the EC number type 32. And that's a pretty critical thing. And they, of course, they list the capacity of it as well. But the type 32, generally when there's a type number listed, it's going to be an MFM drive. And that's just for the setup of selecting that from the reference diskette. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So it's a type 32 in this case. That's what you'd said in the configuration. And it has a known defect map at the time of production where there's bad areas of the disk. And they went through just something, the fact of life that they encountered. And so they went through and marked what was detected as the bad portions of that drive. And typically the drive mapped those off, would not go through and use those. So I recognize kind of this, like say this bronze casing as the MFM style drive. I've got the 8560-071 with the ESDI controller, and those are not interchangeable. Although the cabling and setup of how the drives are connected, and you have the two drives that look, that fit, full-size drives that fit in this drive cage. We'll get into a little bit more of how those drives look very similar, but they're not interchangeable drives at all. Of course, they got to be the controllers types, and the how the drives are which mechanism they use, whether it's MFM or ESDI. And so this is also a Seagate drive. Looks like it has the same part number there, or model number, ST-4053, made in Singapore as well. Tells even the voltage and amperage, same label as the other one. This one's in black, and it's set for everything else. I mean, even the black case has the same holes and areas that it's mounted, same shape exactly as this model. And of course, it's going to be to where the type of the model is going to be the same as well. There's going to be that part number. We could even look at the EC level. And again, it's a type 32, which marks out the heads and sectors and cylinders that the drive has to the system. This one has a very short defect map. It just has one entry. It's specified there. And for the EC levels, let's see. Okay, there's that 827.131, 827.135. So this drive has the later EC level on it, be it however that is. It'd be kind of interesting to look at these. There's the circuit board for it. And I'll get to the point of testing, these drives in an MFM, MUL60 with an MFM controller as well. Let's look at the ROMs on those. That list is LSI 0.38. And don't want to be too casual with these on my lap. It's the same ROM there. But something to the EC level. In fact, there's on this gold board, let's look at them comparably, kind of side by side. Circuit boards are the same, but the bronze colored one actually has bodge wires on it, or even being that earlier EC, which apparently that the PCB of the later EC is gone through and corrected the need for having those bodge wires. So effectively two relatively identical drives. Same model number from Seagate. Now getting in, and when I first opened this box, I had the 4 drives in there, and I thought, hey, it's great. I've got 2 ESDI drives and 2 of the MFMs that we looked over. And this being the one of the drives And I've even seen labeling, you have manufactured by IBM Corporation, and it goes through and I mean, it's got the list about breaking the seal on it. But I've got a defect map, and then it says file type, the hard file type, basically the hard drive of type 31. And then it's got that defect map. And just with, how I know that this is a 44 megabyte drive as well, and it's a type 31. Just a little slight change in the parameters between the type 31 and 32 to how the geometry is set up to get that 44 megabytes. So this is actually, and it's got even that type 0665, and looks very similar to the ESDI drive that's in there, but has the same casing and everything else, mounting appearance otherwise, except for the labels. And so let's take a look at this one. I can go through and show immediately the red label stands out a little bit more, and it says the type 0667. So we know this is different from that 0665. There's not a defect map that's around. Of course, it has this terminating resistor, and I'll get referring to those in the 2 drive situations as I kind of show things. But there is a label on the front of this that says, has the part number, that 90X8528, and this being labels it as a 70 megabyte ESDI. And that's actually the same labeling that's on. There's a red label on top of this, and we can see that when I pull this out, but this is identical to the drive that's here. Now, I could go through and I could set up the instance where I put a dual drive. If it's an ESDI controller, I can certainly run 2 ESDI drives. I would have to have a second power lead, which I've got around, and going through and cabling in that. I need another data cable from the controller, but it's got the control cable, that 34 pin wire, and I could easily set that up. But of course, I need a system that has the ability to go through and run a reference diskette. I need a good floppy, and I do have a reference diskette that I made up for the model with the MFM controller. I figured out that the diskette drive in it did not work. I think that this one works, and we'll find out here in a moment. But there's other aspects as well. In other words, I want to go for kind of a straight 1-for-1 swap in this case, to go through and to swap in this drive and to test if it works. Now, there's a couple other constraints as well. I mean, with the 2 drive system, I'd actually have to go through. Normally, you have the in drive has this, the terminating resistor. And that's actually for, on a 1 drive system, they have the terminator in there, and this drive is at the end of the cable. And that termination is actually, so it's a resistive element that goes through and basically doesn't allow the signal to bounce back on the cable. It would have a signals come out down the insulation displacement connector cable, and if that terminating resistor wasn't there, you get a slight reflection of that signal back through the cable that interferes with the operation. So a second drive being installed in the system, that terminating resistor is pulled out. It's only for the single drive systems, and diskette drives are a lot of the same way, to where the A drive is at the end of the cable, the B drive is in the middle. For this, it would be the C hard drive would be at the end of this cable for the 34-pin connector. And this, as a D drive installed in this forward bay, would be in the middle of that 34-pin cable. So not that I couldn't change anything around, but I just want to go for a single drive system. Now, in this case, another thing is I've pulled the rails off the side of these, actually all these drives. I went through and pulled just the rails that lock into this drive cage. Now, I do have my box of rails here, and I'll go through and pull them out. I think I've got some screws actually in my main box, so I'll have to shift things around and get some rails mounted on this. So I've got, and that's the interesting thing, is these plastic rails that were used with like the IBM AT, they can be recycled in this case and used for the drives that are mounted there. And so I'll get through, and if I don't have screws in here in my box of rails, got a whole bunch of them, I'll go through and see if I can find them in the box. So let's see in the plastic. I got a whole bunch of spare plastic bags there. I don't know if I meant to sort the rails. Some of them are even bagged off. Oh, there's even some screws that are there, whether those fit or not. And then some more elaborate ones, some metal and for other things. This tends to be more of an aspect of for the clone systems I have around, or the later systems that had these various forms of these rails, because there is some differences there, wider formats and things like that. But I've got enough of these rails that I know will work on this system. So I'll get digging in the box for the screws I know are there. Now, when I was moving this around as well, I did have there's a piece that I heard rattling around. In fact, we can look at the let's even compare circuit boards. So there's the underside of the MFM, the 44 megabyte MFM drive. And that's more of the IBM style chips and things like that that are on the other side of that circuit board. And then here's the ESDI. And I need to take pictures of these drives and kind of show the layout where the terminating resistors are and things like that as well. It's got labeling on the PCB. But I was moving it around and I actually heard a rattling there. And this piece, and I don't know if this is like a spindle piece or a, doesn't look like a shock mounting screw. And I'm assuming it's from the drive itself. Sometimes they had grounded spindles and things like that, assembly there that these nestled into. I don't know what the PCB, the way it is. I would have to lift that out and look, but it does look like it's got all the shock mounts and everything otherwise. And I'll keep that piece around just so I can kind of see if it might be something critical that I can restore if I have to, or if it's something else. But we'll just have it off to the side here. Let me go through. I'm going to package these. I'll get everything back in, or at least the drive that was in an anti-static bag back in the bag. We'll put this other MFM drive away. so that we just have the ESDI drive out. And let's get opening the box, because I do have cables. And then, okay, and I have a label here. I don't know why it's in this. It's got this bubble wrap attached, but then it's got 8580 ESDI upgraded BIOS. So one of the aspects that I go through to testing this in a Model 60 is these ESDI drives, even the MFM drives, when in the very low end Model 80, but these could be from a Model 80 as well. And with that note, maybe there's a possibility. So if it has like OS2 or something like that, yeah, there's going to be a difference between CPUs and things like that here. But we'll get to kind of see. I just want to see if the drive is operational. And okay, so there's a box of what looked to be probably the rail screws. See them from different, some different sizes and everything else. Oh, okay, that solves that question. And I'm glad that I don't have this piece of metal floating around inside there. And that's another reason I need to get these in an anti-static bag, to get components that are around the drives. I have a, and this is a some sort of adapter for the 3.5 inch size. It's like it bolts together like that. I just a carrier of some other drive that don't have any more pieces around. But if you look, the shock mount, it's got a similar piece to what was floating around in that ESDI drive that's missing from that little shock mount right there. So mystery solved. That's not from the ESDI drive. That's a relief. We found the screws. We're not interested in really any other cables or anything like that. We'll just get the drives back in the box. Get the one that we want. Look over. And we can get to where we start getting some rails on it. Okay. And it looks like most of these, they have a kind of a security. I'm going for the ones that are the yeah, there's some that are long, some that are short. I want to go for, if I have enough of them, I want to see if the thread's right. I'm just going to use, let's do, because you don't want screws that are too long either, but they do have to fasten the rails down. And I'm looking around, make sure I got a screwdriver. Yeah, let's pull out a couple of those rails. In fact, what I can do, it's even, there's one that's marked as Everex, which was one of the clone systems that was out there. Set that aside. I can keep those of my Everex systems. Even one that has mounting holes labeled and things like that. What I was going to say is, oh, there's another Everex one. Even these are, they've got kind of a right. Those are two I can use. They've got kind of a, only two holes on, so they're effectively a particular side. They're angled in at the back to slide in to mounting like the AT. But I want to go through one of the things I can do with these drive cages. You don't want to over tighten these. These will break on you. But you just loosen those out. And, remember, in fact, it's even marked as P3 in this case. The camcorders are some distance away. But this is marked P3, and this is marked P2. So this was in, and that's at the end of the cable. So that's what goes, the P3 is what goes to effectively the first hard drive, or the C drive, the drive that is at the end of the cable that has the twist right before. We only have one of the data cables here to worry about. And then there's a grounding strap, and that goes up to the drive cage itself. But I want to go through and pull. And when you have just one drive in there, it's always mounted towards the rear in the Model 60 and Model 80. And that leaves, if you have, a drive that is accessed from the front, that part of the bezel pulls out. So you have the ability to put other drive types in here, as it were. And we can see that how that's marked the same way as the one that we're going to put in. And there is, and this is even marked as the right and left. And as far as I know, this is original to this. There's the right, and it does even have some of these spring latches. And the left, there's a little bit more kind of locking or pressure pads into that, that may be a little bit more necessary with this drive cage type. But let's kind of see. I'm just wondering if there's, I don't really have any that match entirely with that kind of that spring loading. I could go through and I could do a comparison of the right and left, as it were. And another aspect is I could go through, of course, and these are more squared off, but they're the same effective type. And, generally you can clamp down these tight enough, top and bottom, that it would hold the drive in place, even though it has some of the springy latches there. So that'd be effectively the right side, and there's other ones that would be the left, would be reversed. That looks like the same front and back. But I'm just going to go through and I'm going to try to use the screws I found. And I'll have to even see. Okay. So as we see here, actually, effectively, even though it wouldn't really matter, I effectively put the rail on backwards, front to back. I had the you always had the narrower section on the models like the IBM AT. Okay. And there I've got a little bit of a screwdriver. Other bits I'm going to need. And that's got kind of like a security bit style. That doesn't quite fit. At least these others are. No, that's got a security bit style too. I don't have my commonly used toolkit here, or do I? Yes, I do. So that makes it a lot easier to find right bit. And of course, I could have gone through and I could have paused. I always talk about whether I would timestamp the videos of the section, and just to say, well, David flails away with getting Rails, the simplistic task of getting Rails on a hard drive. Okay. That looks comparable to the original. Okay. So does that have a thread? No, that's a different thread. Let's find out. Okay. And I'm looking for screws that are all the same. And I don't think that these rails, they have holes forward and back, and really from the length of the drive, it doesn't look like that matters all that much. Okay. Okay. And since this is a 1-for-1 swap, I don't have to run, shouldn't have to run any configuration. This is a like parameter drive with the like parameter drive. And we can see, I just knocked just broke my label off the power cord there, but that's fine. As I say, don't over tighten those. And that locks it down. We do the ground. We do the data cable. And these are keyed. So you can't, well, not with a whole bunch of force. You can't get them in backwards. And remember, we want to go through that P3. And so the two drive cables there, and then the power cable. Okay. So we have everything connected. Let's go ahead. Power it on. Get over to the VGA capture. Okay, it goes through and it counted that planar memory, then the expansion memory that's on the adapter. We have 3 megabyte total, if you've missed the previous video to this. Okay, so heard it beep. There isn't any errors, but this may be even effectively a D drive to a system as well. What I want to do, I'm going to pop in this reference diskette. And of course, I need something like a bootable diskette, and I could boot from it, and I could see if I could get over to the okay. Okay. So that's an expansion memory. I was hoping to go through. Okay, and so the unrecognized adapter installed, that's the expansion memory. And I have I don't have my tweener system up here to switch that file onto the diskette. What I maybe could do, I do have a USB diskette drive. Because I'm thinking I want to go through the route of, I know the reference diskette runs now. And I want to go through, and I may want to set this up as the D drive, and just to come out with a little bit more of a lengthy video, but going through and fully, we didn't get any errors from the hard drive. And maybe that's just not with a bootable drive the way it's set up. Maybe it's just set up as a D drive. 40 minutes into the recording. So I'm going to go through. I'm going to pause the video and I'm going to get the ADF, all of the files for that memory expansion adapter I have in there, because I want to be able to run the reference diskette and configure this as a secondary drive. So I'll be right back after I do that. Okay, so that really wasn't that much elapsed time. And I went through and looking for cabling and things like that as well. I don't have a second grounding strap right at hand. I could probably look at my other Model 60s that I've got around, and they probably have a grounding strap for long term. And of course, you want to be able to ground the static off of this housing properly. But I'm going through. This is the drive that didn't give me errors, but it didn't boot. And so I'm going to get it out of there, set it off to the side. And I went through and I did verify that and normally the Model 60 reference diskette should have had that adapter description file for that memory adapter, memory expansion adapter. And I don't know why it didn't. Well, I'm gonna have to get another power lead as it is anyway. So I'll have to go through and locate another grounding strap anyway, because I'm gonna have to locate a the power from another Model 60 that I have. And I want to show these cabling as well. I'll do that before I pause and look for that other stuff. So on the data cable that goes to the C drive, and I have these nice clips in here that hold it in position. And I looked on the cable itself, and I have a comparable cable here that it's marked as P4 on this end and P5 on the other end. And it is truly where P4 goes into the adapter and that P5 goes to the drive that's in this position here. This is exactly the same length as what's in here. I even have it in a cable assembly that is kind of clipped together the same way to where it's like this, to where this is the adapter connectors. It's got the P4 and it goes up through to where the P5 end, it's kind of underneath here for that primary drive, and then the with the twist to go to this drive, because this is the connector on the end. Now, I didn't find any cables that looked like they're from IBM that were marked to these P-type markings that were longer, because the drive that's in this side of the cage will need a longer data cable. I did find one that's colored the same. It's not marked with an FRU or anything like that. Wow, the ribbon cable across the field of view just gives my camcorder fits on focus. But all I'm needing in this case is a longer cable that can reach between the connector here on the adapter to the drive, where the drive is. And so I will go through and I can probably let's see about getting the drive in place and then connecting the cables afterwards. Let's get the cable on that side. Make sure that we've got the twist in for the side, that side. And I'm going to go through. I'm just going to kind of follow a little bit of convention that this will be. And again, these are keyed. And normally they're keyed. And I have to look at, since this one doesn't have that same keying, I have to look at the stripe, compare stripes, and to where for the drive side connector, it is at that effectively like this. So I'm going to have this in there connected to the drive so I don't kind of stumble around as I go through. And for the front drive, you know, because you already have the drive in the back, you have to go through. Man, I'm glad that this video is a little bit more has more areas to it since I'm going through and putting in a second drive. So you go through, you have to pull the front cover off. And that's true of both the Model 60 and Model 80 for these full-sized drives. And so at least I have a little bit of cushion there to kind of connect up cables as I go. I went with the convention. I'll just have this cable out away from it. I'm going to go through and I'm going to locate a grounding strap that has to be long enough to go between this, and then I have to get the other power lead. So let me go through and pause the video. I didn't realize I left my webcam picture up as well. Okay, and I'll get my webcam picture off. And we'll go through the power connector. And for this forward drive, I think there's two different lengths of cables, but this is really good for this forward power connection of the power supply to go to the drive in the forward bay. That would normally be the D drive of the system, or the secondary hard drive, because the primary is towards the back. That grounding strap is long enough to reach, and all I have to do is hook up the control cable as I go through and bring the drive back. It's already oriented in the right direction. Let me see. I may have to do, undoing the clip may make this quite a bit easier, just to give me enough slack on the cable. Maybe I should. Okay, we just have to remember colored, or pin 1 down basically on this. Get that data cable out of the way so I can do the 34 pin. And wow, that is a real booger to do with that clip in any fastened in any form. And we'll let that. And I don't necessarily have to fix that cable clamp back in position. We're just going to get the drive far enough. We're going to make sure that the primary drive is as far back as it goes, because this back to back, it's pretty tight in there. There's not really a whole bunch of space in front of that for the cover. But we have two drives in there, fully connected now. We have a reference diskette, so I know that I'm able to go through, and that works to boot from it. I'm going to go through to get so this is two 70 megabyte ESDI drives. I know I can boot from this primary drive. Okay. And it didn't warn us about the change in configuration, adding another ESDI drive on. And so I'm a little bit worried. I mean, I could go through and test, go through view. And none of the adapters have changed, of course. And you can see that slot 1 is that IBM expanded memory adapter 0 to 8 megabyte XMA. And on space 10 for this configuration. So let's see if this will give us a list. And certainly we can. Okay. So 2 ESDI fixed disk. So that's a good thing. We're actually going to go through. I don't want to really necessarily start the test. I just want to go through. We're going to go through and eject the reference diskette. I mean, apparently we didn't need it to change any of the configuration for adding that second drive. That's remarkable. I would think that, especially in the case where you added a MFM drive, if they're you have to set the types correctly. So I think that it would want to go through the configuration for that. And we're booting from that primary drive. Okay. And so let's look at see if we can get to our D drive. Wow, good. Do a directory / pause. So that's cleared. It doesn't have any system files or anything else on it. It's a blank drive. Who knows? I may have done that myself. We can maybe going through and prepping that. I mean, if I go through and set that as a any sort of primary drive, of course, I need to sys it to copy the system files over to it. But that's good. It works. There's a reason it didn't boot from it, because there's no boot files on there or anything like that. So I have another 70 megabyte ESDI drive that works. It's set up in this case, or I mean, it takes a minimal amount of setup from there. Who knows if in the end, if I'm going to go through and have a dual hard drive, MUL60 set up. I probably am not going to try and have a comparable MUL80 of that level among my machines, although I could with all the available controllers and everything else I have. So this might be a good setup. I maybe could find the right length for that second data cable, or feed it through kind of the same sort of clasp and everything else, and to get the front cover back on, and I'd have a dual drive system here. This certainly looks like it works. Good arrangement. So I'm glad it turned out that way. I'm glad the drive tested good. I'll have to get into testing those MFM drives, and I expect that that's going to be a little bit more involved, because it's specifying the types of the drives in the configuration, and I can get through and work on the other machine. So for my live stream tomorrow morning, regular schedule, Saturday morning, I do it at 10 a.m. local time, which is -7 GMT time. You can kind of calculate out. That comes to noon on the East Coast, 11 a.m. for the Central Time Zone, and 9 a.m. for the Pacific Time Zone. I'm in the Mountain Time Zone here. And by all means, I look to have some viewers that I think it's going to be a little bit shorter stream. I may go through and do a shorter live stream earlier on, and then later in the day do some of the other items that I have, because I'm a little bit more limited on time. I've got a commitment that's immediately following that, and it might even be just as short as a half hour. I will have another MUL60 up on the bench. I'll go through and start with the MUL60. There was 3 systems I was wanting to cover. I had the MUL60, the 65SX, and the MUL80, and that's a Type 3 planar on the MUL80, so it's highest end. It's 386DX, 25 megahertz, and the planar's look in good shape. But there's a little bit of work I'll have to do on the 65SX, but I wanted to go over those systems on live stream, and that's a lot of system I was trying to get myself to where with 3 systems on the bench, I would have to have my newer studio set up for a bench able to handle 3 systems at one time. I'm not progressed that far. I'm still moving some stuff around. So I'll probably just bring the MUL60 up to here, just like this. I can have it up on the bench. It's dirty in areas, and I have all the parts, all the side parts that I could go through and replace the power supply if I have to. I can go through and other aspects. The planar looks really complete, but probably that's got an MFM controller on it. And I think it's got an MFM drive, so that's another drive I can test. Maybe I can go through and test the MFM drives with that as well. And I have to make sure that I have a diskette drive. I can pull the diskette drive from this one, if nothing else, to go through and to get that to work. But I'm at least going to cover the MUL60 at the regular scheduled time, and probably the other systems at it could be a later live stream or some other aspect. I hate to extend that more than a week and go through the following weeks, but those are the 3 systems I brought back from Edgar Digital in Las Cruces, New Mexico. That was what my convoluted live stream was last weekend, last scheduled time frame, and it cut out after like 45, 50 minutes. And I probably didn't get even half the stuff that was there to show that. But the Mul 60, Mul 65SX, and Mul 80 are what I picked up from down there. And I mean to work with those systems and rehabilitate them, because in some places they are just really, really dirty systems. They've got a lot of grime and crud and everything else that I'll have to work with to that. Even the Mul 60, it's got a little bit of battery corrosion in there, and it has rust on that drive cage. The hard drive carrier has rust on it, and I've got other drive cages as well. So that works out fine if it comes down to it. So I really look forward to seeing people there, and I was glad that this stream went out to being and just going over an hour. But I'm glad that this stream got to the point it did, with me adding this as a second drive and going through and showing out how all that's done, and probably how I'll leave the system. I'm really concerned leaving the system this way now. So you enjoyed the video, and despite all some of the things of maybe being a little bit stilted or something else, click on that like button, please. Subscribe to my channel if you've not done so already. But this is IBM Museum. That's all I have for now. Thank you.